Hey everyone, welcome back to Eternal Archives, where we slow things down, breathe, and wander through the stories that history left behind. Before we begin, take a moment for yourself. Get comfortable. Maybe dim the lights, and if you have a fan nearby, turn it on for that soft, steady hum in the background. When you're ready, let your shoulders relax, let the day fade behind you, and allow your mind to drift into another time. Tonight, we step into the world of the Persian Immortals, a unit of warriors whose name carried weight across continents, whispered with respect by allies and enemies alike. In the vast quiet of ancient Persia, before the sun rose fully above the horizon and before the noise of marching feet disturbed the earth, the desert lay still and cold. The dunes stretched endlessly in every direction, smooth and untouched under the dim blue shade of early dawn. A faint wind rolled across the sand, carrying the last breath of night's chill. It brushed lightly across your skin, the kind of cold that settled deep and held the world in silence. And in this silence stood the Immortals. 10,000 men arranged in flawless formation, each one armored in layered scales that shimmered faintly as the first hints of sunlight touched them. Their spears stood tall, their shields rested at their sides, and their faces remained calm, steady, composed. They were the living symbol of a rising empire, the trained guardians of kings, the warriors whose number never fell below 10,000. And for a moment, you stand among them. The cold morning air presses gently against your face, leaving a thin layer of frost along the edges of your breath. Your armor is chilled, each metal scale cool against your skin. The desert beneath your sandals is firm, hardened by the hours of darkness. Around you, your fellow immortals remain perfectly still, their silhouettes forming clean, unwavering lines across the sands. No one speaks, no one shifts. The world itself seems to pause, held in place by the discipline of these 10,000 warriors. Beyond the horizon, the sky begins to brighten, the first soft glow signaling the sun's approach. Soon the cold will vanish, soon the peaceful chill of dawn will give way to a heat so intense it will press against your armor and cling to your skin. But for now, in this brief calm before the sun asserts its power, you stand anchored among brothers, part of a force the world believed could never die. The Immortals were more than soldiers. In the eyes of the Achaemenid Empire, they represented continuity, strength, and the unbroken spine of Persian power. Their name came from a simple but powerful principle: their number never changed. If a man fell in battle, another took his place before the sun had set. If one became ill, a replacement stepped into formation without hesitation. To outsiders, it appeared as if they never diminished. To those who faced them, it felt as if they could not die. 10,000 stood, 10,000 returned. Their role stretched far beyond the battlefield. They served as royal guards, protecting the great kings from Cyrus to Xerxes. They marched at the front of armies, held the center in battle, and stood watch during court ceremonies. Their discipline was legendary, their silence unsettling, and their precision unmatched. To witness them move was to watch a single body made from 10,000 men, flowing across deserts and plains with flawless unity. And now the sun climbs higher into the sky, burning away the last traces of dawn's cold. You feel the shift almost immediately. The metal of your armor begins to warm, slowly at first, then relentlessly, until each piece feels like a heated stone resting against your skin. The desert around you transforms under the rising light. The pale gold of the dunes brightens, shimmering with a wavering mirage that dances along the horizon. Your breath grows warmer, the air thick with heat, and every inhale tastes of sun-baked sand. Sweat gathers beneath the cloth wrapped around your neck, sliding slowly across your skin, yet your posture never breaks. Around you, the other immortals stand just as steady, just as unmoving. The heat presses against all of you equally, a constant weight, but years of training have taught you not to resist it. You endure it. You accept it. To the immortals, the desert is not an obstacle. It is simply part of the world they were shaped to withstand. The origins of the immortals stretch back to the reign of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire. Before his rise, Persia was divided into tribes and scattered kingdoms, fragmented and uncertain. Cyrus sought unity, not only through diplomacy, but through force, strategy, and unwavering order. He understood that an empire could not be built on temporary strength. It needed a core. It needed soldiers whose loyalty, discipline, and presence would become the backbone of everything Persia would become. He hand-selected the finest men, trained them relentlessly, and molded them into a single unified elite, the Immortals. Under Cyrus, they marched across mountains, deserts, and foreign lands, expanding Persia's borders from the rugged terrains of Media to the wealthy kingdoms of Lydia and beyond. Wherever Cyrus traveled, whether negotiating peace, enforcing discipline, or leading armies, the Immortals followed like a shadow that never wavered. Their reputation spread quickly. Merchants whispered their name across trade routes. Soldiers spoke of them with respect. Even lands untouched by Persia knew the tales. 10,000 warriors who never seemed to die, moving as a perfect machine of flesh and steel. Now imagine yourself standing with them as they cross Persia's northern mountains. The heat of the desert has faded behind you, replaced by the sharp sting of winter wind. The cold bites at your cheeks, turning each breath into a pale cloud drifting into the morning air. The path beneath your sandals is uneven, loose gravel, sharp stones, and frozen patches that crunch softly with every step. A harsh wind sweeps through the mountain pass, pushing against your cloak, rattling your wicker shield, and threading icy fingers through the gaps in your armor. But you do not slow. The Immortals move in perfect silence, their formation unbroken, even on narrow ledges and twisting paths carved into the rugged highlands. You pull your cloak tighter as the wind presses harder, but your expression remains steady. Endurance is not a skill here, it is who you are. The cold stings your skin, numbs your fingertips, and makes every inhale sharper than the last, yet none of it disturbs your focus. The mountains test every man who walks them, but Immortals were shaped to withstand anything the world places before them. Their training began long before any recruit joined the ranks. Many were chosen from noble or loyal families, raised with discipline, and taught the foundations of Persian warfare from a young age. They learned archery, horsemanship, spear techniques, and the mental discipline required to remain calm under pressure. Panic or hesitation could break a formation. Steadiness could save an entire army. By the time a young warrior earned his place among the 10,000, he had endured years of drills and trials that tested strength, patience, and focus. These lessons became the core of what defined the Immortals: unity, silence, and absolute composure. Daily life continued this shaping. They rose before dawn, sharpened weapons, checked armor, and trained for hours. Their routines were strict, their expectations high. This was not a role. They lived as Immortals every moment of every day. The cold bites at your cheeks, turning each breath into a pale cloud drifting into the morning air. The path beneath your sandals is uneven, loose gravel, sharp stones, and frozen patches that crunch softly with every step. A harsh wind sweeps through the mountain pass, pushing against your cloak, rattling your wicker shield, and threading icy fingers through the gaps in your armor. But you do not slow. The Immortals move in perfect silence, their formation unbroken, even on narrow ledges and twisting paths carved into the rugged highlands. You pull your cloak tighter as the wind presses harder, but your expression remains steady. Endurance is not a skill here, it is who you are. The cold stings your skin, numbs your fingertips, and makes every inhale sharper than the last, yet none of it disturbs your focus. The mountains test every man who walks them, but Immortals were shaped to withstand anything the world places before them. Their training began long before any recruit joined the ranks. Many were chosen from noble or loyal families, raised with discipline, and taught the foundations of Persian warfare from a young age. They learned archery, horsemanship, spear techniques, and the mental discipline required to remain calm under pressure. Panic or hesitation could break a formation. Steadiness could save an entire army. By the time a young warrior earned his place among the 10,000, he had endured years of drills and trials that tested strength, patience, and focus. These lessons became the core of what defined the Immortals: unity, silence, and absolute composure. Daily life continued this shaping. They rose before dawn, sharpened weapons, checked armor, and trained for hours. Their routines were strict, their expectations high. This was not a role. They lived as Immortals every moment of every day. Training for the Immortals was constant and demanding. Every day began before sunrise as the 10,000 gathered on the practice grounds. Weapons were sharpened, armor checked, shields repaired. Then came the drills, endless, disciplined, repetitive. They marched in perfect rows, learning to move as a single body. They practiced raising shields together, lowering spears together, stepping forward together. Instructors corrected every detail, from the angle of a stance to the spacing between shoulders, until the Immortals moved with effortless precision. When they weren't drilling, they repaired gear, studied tactics, or trained under senior officers. Nothing was wasted. Every moment strengthened unity. Every exercise crushed hesitation. An Immortal did not simply fight well, he fought without breaking rhythm, without breaking formation, without breaking calm. Now picture yourself standing in the training grounds beneath a blazing midday sun. The sky is a harsh, cloudless blue. Heat presses onto your armor until each metal scale feels like a heated stone against your skin. Sweat gathers along your brow and neck, but you do not raise a hand to wipe it away. Your grip on your spear remains firm, your posture steady. Around you, thousands stand just as motionless. Shadows fall short beneath your feet, trembling faintly as dust swirls in the air. The ground is hot enough to sting through your sandals with every shift of weight. You breathe slow and deep, letting the dry taste of dust settle on your tongue. Instructors give sharp commands. Shields lift in unison. Spears extend forward. The formation advances in one synchronized movement, 10,000 footsteps striking the earth in a perfectly timed rhythm. This is what defines an Immortal, not just strength or skill, but endurance. The ability to remain steady in heat, in pain, in exhaustion. To hold formation without complaint, to stay calm when the world becomes harsh. This discipline is the heart of the Immortals. The armor of the Immortals was one of their most recognizable traits. It was carefully designed for both protection and mobility, allowing them to endure long marches across deserts, forests, and mountains. Their primary armor was a coat of woven fabric reinforced with rows of small metal scales. Each scale overlapped the next, creating a flexible shell that shimmered faintly when touched by sunlight. This design let an immortal move quickly while still absorbing the force of blows in battle. Beneath the armor, they wore long tunics and trousers dyed in deep, dignified colors, maroon, blue, or earth tones. A belt held a short dagger, and sometimes a bow rested across their backs. Every piece of their gear was practical, durable, and shaped by generations of warfare. Their equipment was not just functional, it symbolized their elite status within the empire. Their shields were made of tightly woven wicker, chosen for its strength and lightness. This allowed them to move faster than soldiers burdened by heavy wood or bronze shields. When held in formation, these shields formed a flexible but resilient wall that opponents struggled to break. Their primary weapons were long spears tipped with iron. Some were decorated with subtle touches of gold or silver, marking the prestige of the unit. For close combat, they carried short swords ideal for tight quarters when formations collapsed into hand-to-hand fighting. Now imagine preparing your gear in the quiet stillness before dawn. The armor beside you feels cold as you lift it into place. The scales brush together, making a soft metallic whisper in the early air. You fasten the straps across your chest, feeling the weight settle evenly on your shoulders. Your breath escapes in thin, white clouds as you reach for your spear, its wooden shaft chilled by the night. Your shield carries the same bite of cold, its surface firm beneath your fingers. Around you, other immortals prepare in silence, each movement deliberate and practiced. As the first glow of sunrise appears, the metal of your armor catches a faint shimmer. Morning has begun, and so has the day of an immortal. Life on campaign revealed the true endurance of the immortals. The Persian army did not move in chaos, it advanced like a living system, organized and deliberate. When the army traveled, workers, engineers, supply wagons, and soldiers all moved in coordinated waves. Roads were cleared, bridges built, and camps raised with astonishing efficiency. At the heart of this massive procession marched the immortals, serving as both the symbol and backbone of the king's authority. Their presence steadied the entire army. They marched in flawless lines no matter the terrain, across deserts that burned under the sun, through valleys shadowed by cliffs, and into foreign lands where new dangers waited. Their footsteps created a rhythmic pulse that echoed for miles, a sound that told allies and enemies alike that Persia was near. When camp was made, the immortals established their area with the same precision as on the battlefield. Tents aligned perfectly, fires placed carefully, equipment arranged neatly. Even in the hardship of campaign life, their discipline did not waver. At night, they took shifts guarding the sleeping army, their silhouettes standing silent beneath the stars. They were always ready, whether for an ambush, a sudden order, or a new march beginning before dawn. Their calmness under harsh conditions became the backbone of Persia's military success. Now imagine marching with them long after the sun has disappeared. The desert night is cold, much colder than most expect. The sand beneath your sandals has hardened, chilled by the dropping temperature. Each step produces a soft crunch. The sky above is a vast ocean of stars stretching endlessly across the darkness. Your cloak flutters behind you in the wind. Your breath escapes in pale clouds. You tighten your grip on your spear as your fingers grow cold. Around you, the immortals continue in perfect rhythm, their shadows moving as one long, unbroken line. The silence is deep, but not empty. It carries the quiet strength of 10,000 men united by purpose. In this moment, you do not feel small. You feel part of something unshakable. On the battlefield, the immortals were the anchor of the Persian army. Their discipline and ability to maintain formation under pressure made them indispensable during major campaigns. When they advanced, they did so with a calm precision that unnerved their enemies. Shields overlapped seamlessly. Spears extended in steady lines, and every step was measured. Their long spears allowed them to strike from behind a protective wall, forcing enemies to fight through multiple ranks just to reach the front line. Behind them, Persian archers launched volleys of arrows in graceful arcs, softening enemy formations before the Immortals closed the distance. This coordination, archers at range, Immortals in formation, gave Persia control over the flow of battle. Enemies often felt overwhelmed not by numbers but by the sheer organization confronting them. Sometimes the Immortals led the charge, breaking an enemy line with relentless pressure. Other times they held the center, absorbing the heaviest blows before pushing forward in a steady counterattack. Their wicker shields, though lighter than wooden ones, were used with remarkable skill, angled to deflect, redirect, and weaken the momentum of enemy strikes. In tight formations, they fought as if connected by thought, shifting and adjusting with perfect timing. Now picture yourself standing in formation just moments before a clash. The ground beneath your sandals vibrates from thousands of approaching footsteps. The sky is a muted haze, the sun climbing behind a thin veil of dust. Your shield rests against your shoulder, warm from the rising heat. You grip your spear, feeling the familiar weight settle into your hand. Across the field, the enemy gathers in their own lines. Their armor glints sharply in the morning light. The air grows heavy with anticipation, thick and still. Sweat gathers along your back beneath the armor, sliding slowly as the wind stirs the dust. Yet your breathing remains calm. Around you, no one speaks, no one trembles. The Immortals wait in silence, steady as stone. Whatever stands before you, bronze, steel, or defiant courage, you will meet it with the same unbroken composure. Under the reign of Xerxes, the Immortals reached the height of their prestige. By this time, they were more than an elite military unit. They had become symbols of imperial power woven into the daily life of the Achaemenid court. Their armor was finer, their uniforms more ornate, and their responsibilities extended far beyond battle. They guarded the royal palace, stood watch during ceremonies, and traveled with the king as a constant reminder that the throne was never unprotected. Foreign envoys who entered Persia often spoke of the Immortals first, their silence, their posture, and the shimmering scale armor that reflected torchlight like ripples of gold. When Xerxes prepared for war, the Immortals stood at his side as the empire gathered one of the largest armies the ancient world had ever seen. They marched with him into Greece, serving as the king's elite infantry and the symbol of Persia's resolve. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, where terrain worked against the Persians, it was the Immortals whom Xerxes called upon to break the stalemate that ordinary troops could not. Even in the tight confines of the pass, where movement was restricted and tactics were limited, the Immortals advanced with their usual calm, spear points glinting as they stepped into the press of shields and spears. Though the Spartans held the line with fierce discipline, the Immortals remained steady, pushing without panic or hesitation. Their presence alone spoke volumes. This was Persia's finest, fighting not with shouts or fury, but with controlled, relentless pressure. Now imagine standing in the royal camp on a quiet night during the campaign. Thousands sleep around you, but the camp is not silent. Torches flicker, officers speak in low voices. The air carries the scent of burning wood and distant sea wind. You stand guard before the king's pavilion, your armor glowing softly in the torchlight. The responsibility feels heavy but familiar. You are one of the 10,000, trusted, disciplined, unshaken. As the centuries passed, the Immortals began to change. Empires rarely fall in a single moment. Rather, they erode slowly, bit by bit, as priorities shift and discipline softens. After the reign of Xerxes, Persia remained powerful, but the clarity and structure that once defined the Immortals started to fade. New recruits still filled the ranks, but not all carried the same hardened resolve as those who had marched under Cyrus or Darius. Some joined for status, others for privilege, and the intense training that once shaped every immortal began to soften around the edges. Political tensions grew as regional governors, satraps, gained more influence. Loyalty became tangled between local power and the distant king. Command structures blurred. On campaign, the once perfect formations sometimes showed small cracks, subtle hesitations that would have been unthinkable in earlier generations. The world around Persia was changing too. New enemies, new tactics, and new alliances appeared across the Mediterranean. Warfare evolved, and while the Immortals were still respected, the battlefield was no longer shaped by the same rhythms they had mastered. Now imagine yourself as an aging veteran, standing at the edge of a training field. The morning sun hangs low, spreading warm light across the grounds. Before you, a group of young recruits drills under an instructor's sharp voice. Their movements are earnest but uneven. Shields misalign, steps fall out of rhythm. They try, they sweat, they focus, but something is missing. You rest your hands on your spear, feeling the familiar grooves worn over decades. Your armor fits differently now, but you still feel the weight of history on your shoulders. As you watch the recruits struggle through motions that once came effortlessly to your generation, a quiet realization settles in. Time has shifted. Traditions endure, but not unchanged. Yet, despite this softening, one truth remains. The spirit of the Immortals survives through memory, discipline, and the legacy carried by every man who ever stood among the 10,000. After the death of Cyrus, the Immortals entered a new era under his son Cambyses II. History often remembers Cambyses for his unpredictable temperament, yet his campaigns showed just how critical the Immortals had become to Persia's stability. When he set his sights on Egypt, a land rich, ancient, and fiercely defended, the Immortals marched at the front of the invasion. The journey across the desert was brutal. Days brought blistering heat, and nights dropped into a sharp, biting cold. Supplies ran thin, the terrain fought them at every step, yet the Immortals remained constant. Their discipline steadied the entire army, their silence and unwavering unity serving as a reminder that Persia's elite stood firm no matter the hardship. When they reached Egypt and Cambyses claimed Memphis, the Immortals surrounded their king as an unbreakable wall. Their presence alone signaled that the Achaemenid throne had extended its reach into one of the oldest civilizations on Earth. Under Darius the Great, the Immortals rose to new levels of organization and purpose. Darius restructured the empire, built thousands of kilometers of roads, and refined every layer of administration. The Immortals became essential not just in battle, but in maintaining order across vast territories. They escorted tax caravans, protected royal messengers, reinforced distant provinces, and served as the steady heartbeat of the empire's military network. Now imagine one of their marches, crossing an icy river at sunrise on the empire's northern edge. Mist rises from the water, cold enough to sting your lungs. Your sandals sink into soft mud as you approach the riverbank. The moment you step into the water, a shock of freezing pain shoots up your legs. Your muscles tighten instinctively, but your breathing stays controlled. Around you, the formation remains unbroken. The river pushes hard against your shield and spear, the cold numbing your fingers, but you continue. Step by step, you cross through the frigid current until your feet finally reach solid ground again. Your legs tremble, your armor carries frost, but your posture stays steady. You endured, because that is what an immortal does. Under Darius, the empire didn't simply defend its borders, it pushed outward, testing its strength against distant peoples and restless regions. One of the earliest sparks of conflict came from the Ionian Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor. Though these cities were under Persian rule, they kept their own customs, ambitions, and pride. When they rose in revolt, Persia responded with calculated force. And as always, the Immortals marched at the center of the response. They moved to the western edges of the empire, where land met sea, a coastline unfamiliar to many Persians. To them, it felt like reaching the end of the world, where the land dissolved into endless blue water. But for the Immortals, it was simply another front, another terrain to endure, another test of unity. The Ionian revolt was not one battle, it was many. Sieges, shifting alliances, small clashes that wore down patience and strength. Cities rebelled, fell back into Persian hands, then rebelled again. The Immortals served wherever the conflict grew hottest. They stood outside city walls during negotiations, advanced when diplomacy failed, and held positions that lesser troops could not. Their presence alone often changed the tone of a confrontation. To Greek rebels watching from behind walls, the sight of the 10,000 assembling in perfect formation sent a single clear message: Persia would not tolerate defiance. Now imagine standing with them along the coastline after a long march. The sun dips low, washing the sea in warm gold. Waves roll in with a steady rhythm that feels almost soothing after days of tension. The air smells of salt and wet sand, cooler than the dry deserts of home. You stand near the shore as the Immortals set up camp in calm, deliberate motions. Tents rise in neat rows, fires crackle to life. A soft breeze flows inland, brushing cool air across your armor. For a moment, as you listen to the ocean and watch the sky fade into orange and blue, the world feels peaceful. You know the conflict is not over, but tonight, under the hum of the sea, you allow yourself to breathe. As the Ionian revolt finally collapsed and the coastal cities returned to Persian control, Darius shifted his attention beyond the sea. The Greek mainland had interfered, sending ships, warriors, and support to the rebels. To the great king, this was not a distant inconvenience, it was a challenge to Persian authority, and challenges were answered. The Immortals, now familiar with the sight of foreign ships and the cool wind of the coast, prepared for a greater campaign, one that would carry them across the Aegean and into lands where small city-states stood fiercely independent. The expedition assembled with precision. Supplies were gathered from across the empire, ships prepared in busy harbors, and armies organized into units that reflected the vast diversity of Persia's reach. When the fleet finally set sail, the Immortals boarded with calm discipline. Many had never traveled across open water before, yet they showed no fear as the ships rocked gently beneath their feet. Their armor was wrapped to protect it from the salt air, their shields stacked neatly in rows, their spears secured along the decks. When the Persian forces reached the plains of Marathon, they found a landscape very different from the deserts and mountains of home. Grassy, open, and framed by distant hills, it offered space for large formations to maneuver. But the Greeks who stood before them were not like the rebels of Ionia. These were hoplites, heavily armored citizen soldiers who fought in dense phalanxes. Bronze shields overlapped, spears projected outward in a forest of sharp points. Their discipline and determination were unmistakable. Now imagine standing among the Immortals as both armies face each other in the stillness before battle. The sun rises behind a thin veil of dust. The ground smells of dry grass and earth. Your shield rests against your shoulder, warm from the morning light. Across the field, the hoplites stand in rigid formation, their armor gleaming like fire. The air grows thick with anticipation. You inhale slowly. Your pulse remains calm. Around you, 10,000 Immortals wait in absolute silence. The world feels like it is holding its breath. The Battle of Marathon became one of the rare moments when the Persian advance was halted. Though the empire's armies were vast and its resources unmatched, the clash on the open plain revealed that determination and unity could rise even against overwhelming strength. The Greeks fought with a fierce resolve, and their heavy infantry formations proved difficult to break. When news of the defeat finally reached Darius, it did not strike as a disaster, but as a challenge. Persia had faced setbacks before, and the empire remained powerful. Darius immediately began planning a second, larger campaign to reaffirm Persian dominance. But those plans would never be carried out. Rebellions rose in distant provinces, demanding attention, and age began to wear down the great king. Before he could launch his new invasion, Darius passed away. His son Xerxes inherited not only the throne, but the responsibility of restoring Persian pride. The memory of Marathon lingered across the empire, and to Xerxes it was a mark he intended to erase. For the Immortals, this meant renewed training, reorganized ranks, and preparation for a campaign greater than any they had undertaken. Though defeat was rare in their history, they understood that endurance was measured not only by victories, but by the quiet resilience required to march home after a difficult battle. Now imagine yourself among them during that long return from Marathon. You walk along the shoreline as waves roll in steady rhythms beside you. The air is thick with the scent of salt, and the sky fades into soft hues of gray. Your armor feels heavier than usual, not from damage, but from reflection. The shield at your side brushes against your leg, grounding you in the moment. Around you, the formation remains perfect. No voices complain, no steps falter. The silence is not shame, it is discipline. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the sand as torches begin to flicker to life. With each step, the Immortals move forward, steady and unbroken, carrying the weight of experience without letting it bend their resolve. When Xerxes became king, he inherited the largest empire in the world and the lingering shame of Marathon. The defeat had echoed across the Mediterranean, giving Persia's enemies confidence. Xerxes was determined to erase that memory. He ordered a new invasion of Greece, one so massive it would show the world that Persia's strength had not faded. Messengers rode across thousands of kilometers carrying royal commands. Grain was collected from fertile provinces, horses gathered from distant plains, and timber cut from mountain forests. Across the empire, soldiers prepared, ships were repaired, and weapons forged. Slowly, a force unlike anything seen before took shape. The Immortals watched this build-up with calm discipline. They had served under Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius, and now they would march under Xerxes. Soldiers from many lands joined the army: Egyptians, Medes, Babylonians, Phoenicians, and others. Camps stretched across entire fields, filled with tents, wagons, and the constant movement of men and animals. Meanwhile, engineers worked at the Hellespont, building 2 enormous pontoon bridges to connect Asia and Europe. Ships were tied together, covered with wooden planks, and anchored to withstand the waves. When the bridges were finished, Xerxes poured wine into the sea, symbolically commanding the waters to obey Persia. Now imagine standing on the mustering grounds at dawn. The air is cool, carrying the scent of smoke and damp earth. As you step from your tent, the ground trembles faintly beneath the footsteps of thousands beginning their day. Armor glints in the rising sun, horses snort, banners flutter. The sound of countless voices mixes into a steady hum. You grip your spear and take a slow breath. You are one of the 10,000 standing at the heart of an army preparing to change history. When the great army finally began its march toward Greece, the Immortals took their place near the center, surrounding Xerxes like a living shield. The journey was slow but steady. Roads had been prepared in advance, and supply caravans moved alongside the main force to ensure that thousands of soldiers, animals, and workers never ran short of food or water. Even so, the march was exhausting. Dust rose in thick clouds behind the columns of troops, coating armor and skin. The sun beat down relentlessly during the day, while nights grew cold and quiet beneath the stars. Yet the Immortals moved with the same composure they always carried. Whether crossing wide plains or climbing through rugged passes, their formation stayed tight and their pace never wavered. To the rest of the army, they were a source of calm. If the Immortals marched without hesitation, then surely nothing ahead could break Persia's will. As the army reached the Hellespont, soldiers paused to take in the sight of the massive pontoon bridges. For many, it was the first time seeing the sea up close. Waves rolled beneath the wooden planks, and the faint smell of salt drifted through the air. Crossing into Europe felt like stepping into a new world, one filled with unfamiliar lands and determined enemies. But for the Immortals, it was simply another horizon to conquer. Now imagine walking across the pontoon bridge with the unit. The wood shifts gently beneath your sandals, rising and dipping with the movement of water. The sea wind brushes against your face, carrying a coolness that contrasts sharply with the heat of the march. You grip your spear firmly, feeling the salt in the air cling to the metal of your armor. Ahead of you, the bridge stretches toward the distant shore. Behind you, thousands follow in steady rhythm. As the Immortals step onto European soil, a quiet understanding passes through the ranks. The true test has begun, and history is watching. As the Persian army advanced deeper into Greece, it eventually reached the narrow pass of Thermopylae, a place where the mountains pressed close to the sea, creating a corridor barely wide enough for a formation to breathe. It was here that a small Greek force, led by the Spartan king Leonidas, chose to make their stand. The terrain favored them sharply. Large numbers meant little in such tight confines, and the Persians quickly realized that breaking through would require precision, not brute force. When the first waves of Persian soldiers failed to push the Greeks back, Xerxes called upon the Immortals. Their armor shimmered as they stepped forward, shields held firm, spears angled in steady lines. This was the moment they trained for, the kind of test that demanded unwavering focus. The pass echoed with the clash of bronze and iron. The Greeks fought with fierce determination, their phalanx tight and disciplined. The Immortals pushed steadily, trying to break the wall of shields before them. Blow after blow, step after step, the fighting grew more intense. Yet, despite the pressure, the Greek line held. The narrow terrain prevented the Immortals from using their usual maneuvers, forcing them into a grinding, exhausting struggle. Now imagine standing in that confined chaos. The heat of bodies presses against you from every side. Your shield vibrates with each impact. Dust fills the air, mixing with the metallic taste of sweat and effort. The ground shakes beneath the force of clashing formations. You grip your spear so tightly your knuckles ache, pushing forward an inch at a time. Even in that suffocating space, the Immortals remain calm. Their discipline keeps them from panicking, from breaking formation, from losing control. Around you, no one shouts in fear, only in focus. The world narrows to the weight of your shield, the push of your feet, and the unbroken rhythm of 10,000 warriors moving together. Though the pass did not fall that day, the Immortals showed the world what true steadiness looked like. Despite the difficulty of the terrain at Thermopylae, the Persians eventually learned of a hidden mountain path that bypassed the narrow pass. Once this route was revealed, Xerxes sent forces to circle behind the Greek defenders. When Leonidas realized they were being surrounded, he dismissed most of the allied troops, choosing to remain with a small corps who would fight to the end. The Immortals advanced once more, this time with the advantage shifting in their favor. The Greek resistance was fierce, but the inevitability of being outflanked could not be denied. Thermopylae fell, and the Persian army moved forward into the heart of Greece. For the Immortals, the victory was not celebrated with wild cheers. Their discipline did not change with triumph or hardship. They simply continued their march, protecting the king and maintaining their unbroken formation. They crossed valleys, riverbeds, and open plains, advancing toward the city that had fueled Greek resistance, Athens. When the Persians reached the city, they found it largely abandoned. Most Athenians had evacuated to nearby islands, preparing to fight at sea rather than on land. Still, the burning of Athens became one of the most memorable acts of the campaign. Temples, homes, and public buildings rose in flames, casting orange light across the sky. The Immortals stood guard around the king as smoke drifted upward, carrying the scent of ash and charred stone. Now imagine standing among them as night falls over the ruined city. The ground beneath your feet is warm from the fires. Embers float gently through the air like glowing insects. Your armor reflects the shifting light, flickers of orange dancing across each metal scale. The wind carries the distant roar of collapsing wood. Yet the Immortals remain silent, calm, focused. Their task is not destruction, it is presence. They watch the flames and wait for orders, their posture unchanged even as the ancient city crumbles around them. With Athens burning behind them, the Persians turned their attention to the sea. The Greek fleet had gathered near the narrow straits of Salamis, a place where the waters were tight and movement was limited, much like the terrain at Thermopylae, but on the ocean. Xerxes desired a swift, overwhelming victory, one that would crush Greek morale and end the war quickly. Ships from Persia's vast empire assembled under his command. Phoenician vessels known for speed, Egyptian ships praised for strength, and Ionian crews familiar with the local waters. The Immortals did not fight at sea, yet they played a crucial role in the moments leading up to the battle. They guarded the king, stood watch along the shoreline, and maintained order as commanders relayed strategies. From the cliffs above, Xerxes viewed the unfolding conflict, surrounded by the shimmering presence of his elite unit. When the battle began, the narrow straits forced the Persian navy into tight clusters. Greek ships, smaller and more maneuverable, rammed and struck with precision, overturning the advantage of Persia's larger fleet. The sea erupted into chaos, oars snapping, hulls splintering, and waves stained with debris. Though the Immortals remained on land, they could feel the tension ripple through the ranks as the tide of battle turned against the empire. Now imagine standing on the rocks overlooking the water. The wind whips across your face, carrying the sharp scent of salt and smoke. Below you, ships crash into one another, the sound echoing like thunder. Flames flicker across the surface where a vessel burns, reflections dancing wildly on the waves. You feel the king's presence behind you, steady but silent. His gaze never leaves the battle. The Immortals stand in a protective half-circle around him, shields planted firmly in the ground. Despite the chaos below, your breathing remains calm, your stance does not shift. The sea may rage, but the Immortals remain unmoved, symbols of order, watching a world momentarily swallowed by disorder. The defeat at Salamis did not destroy the Persian army, but it changed the direction of the war. Without control of the sea, supplying such a massive force deep in Greece became difficult. Xerxes made the strategic decision to withdraw most of the army back to Asia, leaving a strong contingent behind under trusted generals. The Immortals returned with the king, maintaining their formation as they crossed back over the pontoon bridges, the same bridges that had once symbolized Persia's unstoppable advance. The journey home carried a different weight. Victories had been won, cities conquered, and enemies humbled, yet the shadow of Salamis lingered. Still, the Immortals did not dwell on triumph or defeat. Their purpose remained unchanged. They were the king's shield, constant, composed, and loyal beyond question. Now picture the slow march eastward. The days grow cooler as autumn settles in. Leaves along the roads shift from deep green to gold and red. You walk in perfect rhythm with your unit, the soft thud of sandals creating a steady pulse that travels down the line. The air carries the earthy scent of harvested fields and distant forests preparing for winter. Villagers gather along the roadsides watching the great army return. Some bow, others stand silently, awed by the sight of Persia's elite. Your armor, though dulled by the campaign, still reflects the afternoon light in ripples of silver and bronze. Your spear rests comfortably in your hand, familiar and reassuring. At night, campfires glow across the plains like scattered stars. The Immortals sit in quiet groups, repairing armor, sharpening blades, and sharing simple meals. The soft crackle of firewood mixes with the low murmur of distant conversations. Above you, the sky stretches clear and calm, the constellations bright against the darkness. In these moments, there is a peacefulness rarely found in war. The campaign has taken its toll, but you endure, just as the Immortals always have. Tomorrow, the march continues, and beyond that, whatever new duty the Empire requires. As the army continued its long return to Asia, the Immortals gradually settled back into the rhythms of life within the Empire. The great campaign had shown both the strength and limits of Persian power, yet the Immortals remained unchanged in their purpose. They resumed their role not only as warriors, but as the king's constant guardians, present in ceremonies, stationed at royal gates, and ready to march wherever the Empire needed them. Within the capital, their arrival was met with deep respect. Citizens stepped aside in silence as the 10,000 passed through the grand avenues, their formations still tight, their armor clean and organized despite months on campaign. Children watched with wide eyes, merchants paused their work, nobles bowed their heads. The Immortals represented stability, order, and the enduring heartbeat of the Achaemenid world. Now imagine returning to the royal city yourself. The streets are lined with carved stone walls, bright murals, and tall columns painted in vivid colors. Incense burns from bronze stands, filling the air with warm, sweet fragrance. As your unit approaches the palace, the massive gates open slowly, revealing courtyards filled with gardens, fountains, and polished stone walkways. The sound of flowing water echoes softly across the walls, a peaceful contrast to the roar of battlefields left behind. You stand in formation beneath towering pillars decorated with images of lions, bulls, and wind guardians. Sunlight filters through the courtyard, warming your armor. Court officials pass with scrolls and messages, bowing respectfully as they walk by. The king appears on a raised platform, surrounded by attendants. His presence radiates authority, yet his expression softens when he sees the familiar discipline of his elite guard. There is no grand speech, no celebration. Instead, he lifts his hand in a gesture of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of loyalty and endurance. For an immortal, this simple gesture means more than any feast or treasure. It is the affirmation of your place in the empire, your purpose renewed, your strength recognized. Life inside the royal city brought a different rhythm for the Immortals. Their duties shifted from battle to constant readiness, guarding palace entrances, escorting officials, watching ceremonies, and responding instantly to any order from the king. Even without war, discipline never faded. Each day began with drills. The palace grounds rang with the soft clatter of spears, the tightening of bowstrings, and the synchronized footsteps of perfect formations. Their living quarters were simple but organized. Rows of clean rooms held neatly stored shields, spears, and polished armor. Meals were modest: bread, vegetables, dates, and seasoned meats prepared in large communal kitchens. The atmosphere was calm and focused. The Immortals lived with the understanding that discipline wasn't a battlefield requirement, it was a way of life. Now imagine yourself seated beneath a shaded pavilion in the palace gardens. A cool breeze rustles the leaves of tall cypress trees. A small fountain beside you releases a gentle stream of water. It sounds soft and steady. Your armor lies beside you, freshly polished. You wipe down your spear, keeping the wood smooth and the metal clean. Other Immortals sit nearby, speaking quietly or tending their gear. Birds flutter in the branches overhead. Sunlight filters through the trees, creating warm patches on the ground. For a rare moment, you feel a peaceful silence, the calm that exists only between campaigns. The air carries the scent of flowers and faint incense drifting from the palace halls. Children's laughter echoes far beyond the walls. You breathe slowly, taking in the stillness. Despite the hardships of your life, you feel no regret. Service has shaped you, loyalty has defined you, and in this quiet moment you understand that your presence is part of the peace the Empire enjoys. As the years passed, veterans among the Immortals often found themselves guiding younger recruits. Their experience carried weight. Every scar, every quiet word, every correction offered during training shaped the next generation. Though the Empire changed, the essence of the Immortals was preserved through this mentorship. Older warriors taught not only how to hold a spear or stand in formation, but how to remain calm under pressure, how to endure hardship without complaint, and how to carry the dignity expected of Persia's elite. Sometimes these lessons happened not on the training grounds, but during quiet moments, shared meals, nighttime patrols, or pauses between duties. Younger soldiers would ask about distant campaigns, about marches through mountains or battles against foreign armies. Veterans rarely glorified their experiences. They spoke simply, describing the weight of armor, the importance of unity, and the quiet strength that kept them alive when the world around them was chaos. Now, imagine yourself walking along the palace walls during an evening patrol. The sun has set, leaving streaks of deep purple and gold across the horizon. Lamps flicker along the pathways, casting warm pools of light across polished stone. Your footsteps echo softly as you move past carved reliefs depicting ancient victories. A new recruit walks beside you. His armor is freshly issued, his movements still slightly rigid. He glances at you occasionally, waiting for guidance without knowing how to ask. You speak calmly, offering small lessons, reminders about vigilance, breathing, awareness. You point out how the shadows fall across certain corners where guards typically stand, how to listen for changes in the night's rhythm. The recruit nods with quiet respect, absorbing every word. In that moment, you recognize something familiar in him, a reflection of who you once were. And as you walk, you feel the weight of responsibility, not as a burden, but as a continuation of the legacy you inherited. The Immortals survive not only through discipline and armor, but through the steady hands of those who guide the next to take their place. As time moved forward, the Immortals continued to serve not just as warriors, but as symbols woven into the identity of the Empire itself. Their presence at ceremonies, festivals, and diplomatic gatherings reminded everyone, from nobles to foreign envoys, that Persia was held together by discipline, unity, and strength. Their calm demeanor and flawless formation embodied the stability the Achaemenid kings wanted the world to see. But even in these peaceful duties, the Immortals never forgot the realities of war. They knew campaigns could rise without warning, borders could shift, rivals could rebel. And so they trained constantly, sharpening their skills so that when the Empire called, they would be ready. Now imagine one of these training sessions at dusk. The sun is sinking low, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep blue. Torches line the edge of the courtyard, their flames flickering in the growing darkness. You take your place among the 10,000, your armor catching faint glimmers of light as the instructors call out commands. Shields rise, spears extend, the formation shifts with practiced ease, each movement smooth and controlled. Dust rises from the ground with every synchronized step, swirling around your feet before drifting into the warm evening air. Your breath is steady, your focus sharp, your senses tuned to the presence of the warriors beside you. As the drills continue, the sky deepens into night. Stars emerge overhead, faint at first, then bright. The torches illuminate the courtyard in a soft golden glow. The Immortals move like shadows, fluid, disciplined, unbroken. When the final command is given and the session ends, you lower your spear and stand still for a moment, feeling the quiet settle across the courtyard. You wipe the sweat from your brow and listen to the soft crackle of the torches. Despite the long day, you feel centered, grounded in purpose. The drills are not a burden, they are a reminder that the Immortals exist to uphold something greater than themselves. Even as the Empire reached its peak, the Immortals understood that strength was not only measured in battles won, but in the stability they helped maintain each day. They stood watch at the palace gates, guarded royal processions, and ensured that the king could travel safely across vast lands. Their presence deterred rebellion, prevented disorder, and reminded every province, from the mountains of Media to the fertile plains of Babylon, that the empire's heartbeat remained steady. But time changes all things, even those built on discipline. New cultures rose along Persia's borders, each with their own tactics and ambitions. The Immortals adapted as best they could, refining their armor, improving communication, and adjusting strategies to confront unfamiliar threats. Still, the world outside was evolving quickly, and shadows of future challenges slowly approached. Now imagine yourself standing atop a fortress wall, overlooking a distant province. The wind is cool, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant rivers. Below, farmland stretches across the horizon in neat patches of green and gold. Villagers move through the fields, their small figures illuminated by the warm glow of late afternoon sunlight. Your spear rests against the stone beside you. You feel the texture of the wall beneath your hand, solid, ancient, a reminder of the Empire's long history. Behind you, other Immortals walk their patrols, their footsteps soft and steady. For a moment, the world feels peaceful. Birds circle overhead, calling out sharply as they dive toward the treetops. The sun drifts lower, casting long shadows across the landscape. You breathe in slowly, letting the calm settle into your chest. You know this peace exists because warriors like you stand ready. Because the Immortals hold the line, visible or unseen, at the edges of the Empire. Even if the future brings uncertainty, you take comfort in the knowledge that you serve something vast and enduring. The Empire may shift, borders may change, but the legacy you uphold continues to shape the world around you. As the Empire grew older, the Immortals faced challenges that did not always come from open battle. Some threats rose from within: political struggles, ambitious governors, and regions testing the limits of Persian control. In these moments, the Immortals acted not just as soldiers, but as symbols of stability. Their presence alone could calm unrest or remind wavering leaders that the king's authority reached every corner of the empire. Yet the world around Persia was changing. Greek culture spread through trade, introducing new ideas and tactics. To the east, powerful kingdoms expanded and watched Persia closely. While the empire remained vast, the edges of its dominance no longer felt as unshakable as before. The Immortals sensed these shifts, even if they carried on with their duties in silence. Now imagine yourself on a patrol through a quiet mountain pass. The air is crisp and thin, brushing cool against your skin. The path winds along steep cliffs, and far below, a river glimmers faintly in the valley. Your cloak moves gently in the wind as you steady your grip on your spear. Ahead, several Immortals walk in steady formation, their armor clinking softly with each step. You scan the ridges and slopes, alert to movement. Even peaceful places can hide danger. Bandits, rebels, or foreign scouts sometimes slip through these routes. Your patrol ensures the empire remains secure. As the sun begins to set, the mountains fade into shades of gold and deep blue. Shadows stretch across the rocks. Despite the uncertainty growing in distant lands, a quiet strength settles within you. Your duty is clear. You walk the ancient paths of Persia, carrying forward a legacy built on discipline and endurance. Whatever changes come, the Immortals continue their watch. In time, the world's changing tides would bring the Immortals face to face with a rising power unlike any they had encountered before. To the west, a young Macedonian king named Alexander began forging a united Greek force, driven by ambition, strategy, and a desire to challenge Persia's dominance. At first, word of him reached the empire as distant rumor. A skilled commander, a clever diplomat, a leader capable of inspiring fierce loyalty. But soon, rumor became reality as Macedonian armies moved east with remarkable speed. For the Immortals, this new threat was both familiar and unfamiliar. They had faced Greek hoplites before, but Alexander's forces fought with a different precision. The Macedonian phalanx was tightly coordinated, supported by swift cavalry and generals who adapted quickly on the field. The Immortals, though still elite, were no longer the unstoppable force they had been centuries earlier. The empire's structure had weakened, and its once steady systems strained under the weight of constant external and internal pressure. Now imagine yourself on the plains near the Tigris River, preparing for battle. The morning air is warm, carrying the scent of dry earth and distant water. Your armor feels heavier than usual, not from age, but from the knowledge that this opponent is unlike others you've faced. Across the field, the Macedonian army gathers in disciplined ranks. Their long pikes glint in the sunlight, forming an unbroken wall of sharpened points. You adjust your shield, feeling its familiar weight. Around you, the Immortals stand calm, their formation tight and steady. Despite the tension in the air, there is no panic. You have trained for moments like this your entire life. As the wind picks up, dust swirls between the two armies. For a long moment, the battlefield is silent. You breathe slowly, grounding yourself in the discipline that has shaped generations. Whatever comes next, you will face it with the same resolve that carried the Immortals through deserts, mountains, and centuries of war. When battle finally erupted between Persia and Alexander's forces, the Immortals fought with the same resolve that had defined them for centuries. But the clash revealed how much the world had changed. Macedonian tactics were fast, flexible, and coordinated with remarkable precision. Their cavalry struck hard at the flanks, while the long pikes of the phalanx pressed forward in an unbreakable wall. The Immortals held their ground with discipline, yet the battlefield no longer moved at the familiar rhythm they had trained for. Still, they did not bend easily. Every shield raised, every spear thrust, every formation shift showed the depth of their training. They fought not only for victory, but for the weight of their legacy, for the kings they had served, the lands they had marched across, and the centuries of warriors who stood in their place before them. Even as the fight grew desperate, their composure remained intact. Now imagine yourself in the heart of that struggle. Dust thickens the air, stinging your eyes and clinging to your tongue. Shadows of cavalry flash past in bursts of motion. Metal crashes against metal in a relentless rhythm. You brace your shield as a Macedonian spear strikes, the impact sending a jolt down your arm. You counter with your own thrust, feet digging into the dry earth for balance. All around you, the Immortals fight shoulder to shoulder. No one screams in fear, no one breaks formation. Even in the face of a new and powerful enemy, the 10,000 hold the line with steady determination. The battlefield roars, yet inside your mind there is a strange clarity, a focus sharpened by years of training. Despite their discipline, the tide of battle shifts. Macedonian forces press forward with relentless energy, their formations adjusting like parts of a living machine. The Immortals resist, but the momentum of history has begun to move in a new direction. Still, in every step, every breath, Every strike, you embody what it means to be an immortal, unwavering, disciplined, bound by purpose. As Persia struggled against Alexander's relentless advance, the Immortals continued to fight with dignity and composure. Even when the empire's armies faltered, their presence remained steady, a final pillar of order in a world shifting beneath their feet. Battles were lost not because the Immortals lacked skill, but because the structure that had once supported them had weakened. Communication faltered, satraps argued, and loyalties across the empire became uncertain. The unity that had made Persia unstoppable centuries earlier was beginning to fracture. Yet the Immortals held to their purpose. In every confrontation, they protected the king, guarded the retreating forces, and bought precious time for the empire to reorganize. They knew the odds were against them, but their duty had never depended on easy victories. It depended on endurance. Now imagine a moment after a long day of fighting. Dusk settles over the camp, the sky fading into deep purples and muted gold. You sit on a small rise of earth overlooking the resting army. Your armor is dusty, dented in places, and your spear shows marks from countless impacts. You lower your shield beside you and take a slow breath as the cool evening air washes over your face. Behind you, other Immortals move quietly through the camp, checking on the wounded, repairing gear, or sharpening blades for the next day. There is exhaustion, but no despair. The 10,000 carry themselves with the same discipline they held in times of triumph. Across the plain, small fires flicker, casting warm pools of light. The murmurs of soldiers drift through the night, mixing with the soft crackle of burning wood. In the distance, you hear the faint rush of a river winding through the dark. In this moment, you understand something profound. Empires may rise and fall, borders may shift, kings may come and go, but the ideals you live by endure. The Immortals are more than an elite unit. They are a standard of discipline and loyalty that time cannot erase. As Alexander pressed deeper into Persia, the Immortals faced the final turning point of their long legacy. The empire that had once stretched confidently across continents was now strained by years of internal conflict and rapid assaults from the Macedonian forces. Cities surrendered, alliances shifted, and the roads that once carried the proud armies of Cyrus and Darius now filled with uncertainty. Yet even as the world around them changed, the Immortals remained unbroken in spirit. They guarded the king through every retreat, protected supply lines, and stood at the front whenever a counterattack was attempted. Their presence reminded the Persian people that the core of the empire still lived, disciplined, silent, and steadfast. Now, imagine a quiet moment in the final days of Persia's resistance. You stand within a dimly lit hall of a fortress near the heart of the empire. Tall stone columns rise into the shadows of you. Torches flicker along the walls, casting long waves of warm, shifting light across your armor. The air smells of dust, smoke, and the faint sweetness of burning oil. Outside, you hear the distant murmur of soldiers preparing for another march, footsteps, whispered orders, the clank of equipment. But inside this hall, everything feels still. You rest your hand on the smooth wood of your spear, feeling the familiar grooves worn by years of service. Around you, other Immortals stand in absolute silence, waiting for word from their commanders. No one questions the future. No one speaks of fear or defeat. The discipline passed through generations lives within each steady heartbeat. In that stillness, you sense the end approaching, not as panic, but as a calm realization that history is shifting. The empire may fall, but the ideals you upheld will continue far beyond stone walls or royal commands. The legacy of the Immortals is carved not only in victories, but in the unwavering loyalty and composure shown in moments like this. When Persia finally fell to Alexander, the Immortals did not vanish in a single moment. Their ranks did not crumble in panic, nor did they fade into the shadows without dignity. Instead, they became part of a transition, one era ending, another beginning. Some served under new administrators appointed by Alexander, maintaining order in regions that still required experienced soldiers. Others returned to their homelands, carrying with them the discipline and pride of a lifetime spent in service. And many, though no longer part of an official unit, remained symbols of the strength Persia once projected across the world. The fall of an empire is never just a political shift, it is an emotional one. Traditions, identities, and familiar rhythms are challenged. Yet for the Immortals, their sense of purpose was always larger than a single king or country. Their discipline had become part of who they were. What they represented could not be erased by conquest. Now imagine yourself walking through a quiet street in the aftermath of the transition. The sun hangs low, casting long shadows across the stone buildings. The air is calm, carrying faint echoes of distant markets and the soft trickle of water from public fountains. Your armor is no longer required by command, but you wear a simple cloak draped over your shoulders. People who pass you offer respectful nods. They know who you are, or rather, what you were. You pause near a courtyard shaded by tall columns. Children run across the open space, chasing one another with wooden sticks, pretending to be warriors. Their laughter fills the warm air. One of them glances at you, eyes wide with curiosity. He does not see defeat. He sees the quiet strength of a man who served something greater than himself. In that moment, you understand that the Immortals' legacy endures not in titles or armies, but in memory and example. You carry that legacy within you, whether the empire stands or falls. Even after the empire fell to Alexander, the legacy of the Immortals did not disappear. Their unit may have ended, but the memory of their discipline and unity continued to travel across the ancient world. Historians wrote of their calm strength. Soldiers admired their precision. Other kings attempted to create elite guards inspired by them, yet none fully matched the quiet resolve that defined the 10,000. The Immortals had become more than warriors. They had become a symbol of what disciplined men could achieve together. Their story showed that true power was not only in weapons or numbers, but in steadiness, in marching through deserts without breaking formation, in standing firm beside kings through triumph and defeat, in facing fear without letting it shape their actions. Now imagine yourself years after leaving the unit. You live in a quiet village surrounded by rolling hills and clear streams. Life moves slowly, morning chores, evening walks, simple meals shared with neighbors. Though you no longer wear armor, the habits of an immortal remain. You still rise early, you still move with purpose. Your home is kept in perfect order. One evening, you sit outside as the sun sets in warm shades of orange and red. A cool breeze brushes your face. Children run nearby, laughing as they play with wooden spears. One approaches you, curious about your past. You speak softly, choosing your words carefully. You do not talk about the violence of battle, but about discipline, unity, the calm that held the Immortals together. As you speak, you realize that the true legacy of the Immortals lives not in stone carvings or royal records, but in the lessons passed quietly from one generation to the next. Over generations, the stories of the Immortals slowly turned into legend. Travelers spoke of them as if they were larger than life, warriors who moved in perfect lines, whose armor shimmered like water in the sun, and who never showed fear even when the odds were impossible. Some of these tales were exaggerated, others simplified, but all of them carried the same message. The Immortals were the embodiment of discipline. Historians studied them with fascination. How did a unit maintain such unity for centuries? How did they adapt through different kings, different lands, and different styles of warfare? Those who understood their legacy knew the answer wasn't found in armor or weapons. It was found in identity. Each man who joined the 10,000 stepped into a tradition shaped by countless warriors before him. Their strength came from continuity. Now imagine yourself as an old man sitting beside a small fire in the cool evening air. A few young villagers gather around you, asking for a story from the days when Persia stood proud and its armies marched across continents. You look into the flames, and for a moment you're no longer old. You're standing in formation at dawn, hearing the gentle clink of armor, feeling the stillness before battle. You speak softly, choosing your words with care. You don't describe the bloodshed or fear. Instead, you talk about the calm, the unity, and the sense of purpose that defined the Immortals. The children listen quietly, wide-eyed, imagining what it must have felt like to stand among the 10,000. When you finish, the fire crackles gently, filling the silence. You lean back, knowing the story will live on in their memories, and through them, the Immortals continue. As centuries pass, the Immortals shift from a historical military unit into a symbol remembered across cultures. Artists carve their figures into stone walls, scribes record their marches on long scrolls, and poets describe them as a steady force that shaped the empire's glory. Some stories portray them as almost supernatural, warriors who never tired or bled. Others describe them more simply as men who stood firm when others broke. Beneath the exaggerations lies the truth that made them unforgettable. The Immortals represented balance, strength without recklessness, discipline without cruelty, loyalty without losing themselves to rage. Their example showed that real power comes from steadiness of heart, not from chaos or fear. Now imagine walking through the ruins of an ancient Persian city long after your life has ended. Columns lie broken, stones weathered by wind and time. Yet carved into the surviving walls are rows of warriors, straight-backed, calm-faced, spears in hand. Travelers stop and admire these carvings without knowing they are looking at echoes of the 10,000. A warm wind moves through the empty streets, carrying dust across the old courtyards. The silence feels heavy, but not empty. It feels filled with memory, as if the past still lingers in every crack of stone. Though kingdoms rise and fall, the impression left by the Immortals remains. In that imagined moment, you realize something powerful. Even when cities crumble and empires fade, the character people leave behind endures. The Immortals' legacy lives not through monuments alone, but through the timeless message they carried. Stand firm, stay disciplined, serve with purpose. As time moved forward, the legacy of the Immortals continued to influence cultures far beyond Persia's original borders. Military leaders studied their structure, scholars debated their tactics, and kings admired the loyalty that defined them. Even when new empires rose and old ones faded into dust, the story of the 10,000 remained a reference point, a reminder of what disciplined warriors could achieve when united by purpose rather than fear. Their endurance in memory came from the balance they embodied. They were fierce without being reckless, loyal without being blind, and disciplined without losing their humanity. Generations looked back on them as proof that the strongest armies were not simply those with the best weapons, but those with the strongest hearts. Now imagine standing on a quiet hillside overlooking the distant ruins of a once great Persian city. The landscape is peaceful now, covered in wild grass and scattered stones. The wind carries a soft, warm breeze across your face, and the sky stretches wide above you in calm shades of blue. You close your eyes and listen. For a moment, it feels as though you can hear echoes from the past, the steady marching of the 10,000, the clink of armor shifting in perfect rhythm, the deep breaths of warriors preparing for another long journey. When you open your eyes again, the ruins remain silent, but the feeling stays. You recognize that the Immortals were never just soldiers. They were a living promise of perseverance. They represented the idea that discipline can outlast turmoil, that purpose can outlast defeat, and that unity can outlast even the fall of an empire. And as you stand there, a quiet understanding settles over you. The world changes, kingdoms rise and crumble, but the ideals carried by the Immortals continue to inspire anyone seeking strength, order, and meaning. Their legacy is not frozen in the past. It is alive in every person who chooses to stand firm when it matters most. As history pushed forward, new civilizations rose with their own armies, philosophies, and legends, yet the Immortals remained a silent foundation beneath many of them. Commanders studied how 10,000 men could move as one mind. Philosophers pointed to their calm discipline as an example of inner strength. Even storytellers borrowed their image to symbolize unity in times of struggle. Though centuries passed, the idea of the Immortals never faded. It evolved, adapted, and resurfaced in new forms across distant lands. Their influence stretched farther than they ever marched. The concept of elite royal guards, soldiers chosen not only for skill but for loyalty and composure, existed in countless empires that followed. Every time a king surrounded himself with a trusted corps of warriors, the shadow of the Immortals could be seen behind that decision. Their legacy shaped not only the battlefield, but the very idea of what it meant to protect something greater than oneself. Now imagine a distant future scholar walking through a quiet museum. He sees ancient armor displayed behind glass, metal scales shimmering softly under warm lights. A plaque beside it reads, "Achaemenid Immortal, 5th century BCE." People stop and stare, imagining what it must have felt like to stand among the 10,000. The scholar closes his eyes for a moment. He pictures the deserts, the mountain passes, the crowded courtyards of ancient Persia. He imagines the steady breathing of an immortal in formation, the soft thud of synchronized footsteps, the calm focus carried into every battle. Even though thousands of years separate them, the feeling is still powerful, still alive. Because the Immortals were never just a military unit. They were a message written across time. Strength is not loud, discipline is not rigid, and unity is a force that can shape the world. In the end, the Immortals endure not because of the empire they served, but because of the qualities they embodied. Their discipline became legend, their unity became a lesson, their calm strength became a symbol carried forward by generations who never met them yet felt inspired by what they represented. Long after the stones of Persepolis cracked and fell, long after new empires rose and claimed the world, the memory of the 10,000 moved quietly through time like a steady flame that refused to fade. Their story teaches that greatness does not depend on eternal victory. Even the strongest kingdoms fall, even the most powerful kings are eventually forgotten. But the spirit behind their actions, the commitment to duty, the steadiness in chaos, the willingness to stand together, outlives everything else. This is why the Immortals remain alive in history. They were men whose character outshone their weapons, whose discipline outlasted their battles. Now imagine one final scene. The sun sets over an open plain, casting long shadows across soft earth. A gentle wind moves through tall grass, and distant mountains glow in fading light. You stand there, not as a soldier, not as a guardian, but as a reflection of the countless warriors who once carried the name Immortal. There is no battlefield now, no king to protect, no empire to hold together. Yet as you breathe in the quiet air, you can still feel the presence of those who marched before you, the calm of their steps, the strength of their unity, the purpose that guided them through centuries. You lift your gaze to the horizon. In that moment, you understand. True immortality is not living forever. It is being remembered for how you lived. And so, the legacy of the Immortals continues, alive in stories, alive in memory, alive in the hearts of all who seek strength with discipline and purpose with calm.